Wolverhampton and Walsall and places like that. So the boundaries don't matter with this. It's getting it done in the most efficient and effective way, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
True.
Morning, Helen.
Morning, Helen. Morning. I think it's due to start at 11:20.
Yeah, I think that's right, Mr. Spencer. And I think, in fact, we're webcast live from now. So
okay.
it's.
Thank you very much. For those who have only just joined, it's me chairing it today. Unfortunately, John isn't very well, so he phoned me about an hour ago just to say that he couldn't make it. So I'll endeavour to do my best. Thank you very much for helping out. If we start off then with the usual request, if you could perhaps turn your microphones off at least to save the bandwidth, and then we'll see how we go with that. Helen, do we have any apologies?
No apologies, Chair, other than Mr. Francis.
Thank you. Any declarations of interest? I'll take that as a no. Minutes, item 3 then, minutes of the meeting held on the 6th of January, pages 1 to 8. Has everyone had the opportunity to read through them? If I just go through page by page, if there's anything people want to raise, there's page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, and a short bit on page 8. If there's no issues, then if I could have someone who just to second those, and we'll accept them.
I'll second those, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Moving on then to item 4, the Children and Families Transformation Phase 2 update and learning from the serious case review. I think we've got Helen here. Thank you very much. I know today's been a really busy day for you, and so I'm very grateful that you've found the time to come and talk us through this. Helen, could I just ask you if you'd just introduce it and talk through just a little of the history, and then I'll open it up to some questions.
Bob, sorry to interrupt. I wonder if I could just open up before we start with Helen, if that's okay with you. Okay, so good morning, Chairman and committee members. Members will recall in December 2020 a serious case review was commissioned by Staffordshire Safeguarding Children's Board, which was published then. And this followed the tragic death of 4 children in a house fire in February 2019. The 4 children are very deeply missed by everybody who knew them. The harrowing events which unfolded that night has deeply affected the community. The coroner's verdict is that all 4 children died by inhalation of products of combustion. He indicated that, having looked at the evidence, the most likely cause of the fire was an unextinguished cigarette. We at the local authority contributed fully to the review, and although the tragic outcome could not have been predicted, the review identified some areas of learning in relation to the issues of neglect. So we're continuing to implement the recommendations, and as all members will know, we are currently implementing a transformation process across children's services. And the findings of this report and the transformation process are intrinsically linked. Today, as you know, we've got Helen Riley, the Deputy Chief Executive and Director for Families and Communities, who's our Director of Children's Services here. Mr. Chairman, if I could hand over to Helen to do her introduction and take us through the presentation.
Yeah, thank you very much. Helen, over to you.
Okay, thank you. So I have got some slides, which I'm hoping the other Helen is going to be able to share for me. What I hope to do today is that the transformation is around whole system, and I've been through the transformation several times with members, and indeed it's been to the select committee. What I'm going to try and do today is focus on the learning as Councillor Sutton just expressed around dealing with neglect, particularly as this was, I suppose, the issue arising from the tragic incidents 2 years ago now. Oh,
sorry, 1 moment. I'm getting that. Just 1 moment. This is. I'll just get rid of that for a moment. Apologies. See if we can do that again. Not entirely sure why that's there. Oh. 1 moment, I'll just try and sort this out. We seem to have a bit of a problem.
Okay, thank you very much. That looks promising.
That should be there now, I think.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
yes, thanks, Helen. I'm gonna say in true Chris Whitty fashion. Can I have the next slide, please?
Yeah, we're trying to. There we go. Okay,
so I'm going to start with a little bit of context from 2 years ago now, when the tragic events occurred in around February 2019, and really in terms of context to focus on what were some pressing workforce issues at that time. So for various reasons, during late 2018 and early 2019, the council experienced some significant difficulties in recruitment and retention of social workers particularly. Many of these reasons have been well rehearsed, but one of the predominant reasons at that time, Staffordshire was the only good children's service in the West Midlands. And our social workers were always targeted for any recruitment campaigns. And around us, other local authorities started to offer things like golden hellos for social workers and introduce a friend bonus. On top of other corporate reasons for why we were struggling with retention at that time, this approach to recruitment meant that we lost a significant number of permanent staff, and saw an increase to the rate of the employment of agency staff to about 18%, which was the highest it has ever been in the history, and is still the highest it has ever been in the history of Staffordshire's children's services. This reduction in the permanent workforce meant that the number of children that each social worker was working with increased significantly to around an average of 30. That means that each social worker had less time available to work directly with the family. And also, many agency staff are of very high quality, but also bringing agency staff in at short notice often meant that it took quite a while for them to be fully trained up into our practices and processes, and this in itself creates a challenge. The previous nature of social work, really, up until, I suppose, a few years ago, had been for social workers to look for an event almost. It's the only way I can describe it really, to indicate that children were no longer safe. So a threshold event such as a visit to A&E, spotting an injury, police involvement potentially with the family around either domestic violence or drug and alcohol problems. And I think the nature of continuous kind of insidious drip feed of neglect on children was not always acknowledged. And where it was seen, that kind of continuous impact of that insidious nature, not all social workers were equipped with the skills and techniques to know how to work with the family to improve the situation, but also would feel that the family hadn't reached a threshold that meant legal proceedings to start the move into care was not met as well. So that's where we were in February 19. So if we move on a slide. So 2 years later, I'm going to update on where we are now and how, as we go through the next few slides, the transformation programme tries to capture not just the recommendations from the serious case review, which are quite specific, but the wider learning for us around working with neglect. For members' information, today we have started the formal consultation with staff on the transformation. I've done an hour session this morning, and we've got several more hours sessions this afternoon. So we are now, it's day one of formal consultation, which will run with the staff on the draft proposals until May the 10th. So in terms of workforce, I guess where are we now? So we now have a 4% vacancy rate for social workers, which is much improved from 2019, and it does feel like back to normal. So we've always had a relatively stable workforce, and it feels like over the last 2 years, the work we've done has seen us return to that stability. So the average number of children that social workers are now working with is around 18. So 32 years ago, 18 now. As part of the transformation, and we did it in phase 1, which was 18 months ago, and it has been confirmed into phase 2, which has started today, that we reintroduced the role of the professional lead for practice and development, the principal social worker. And Becky Reynolds joined us around 18 months ago, and she has been an outstanding addition to improving our practice. Becky works with frontline professionals and managers to identify development needs and ensure the embedding of them, and that includes working with long-standing neglect. The first National Social Worker Survey that's just been run for the first time nationally has shown that Staffordshire's performed better around social work support and social work satisfaction than the region and the national average. And this includes every question, including recording the support people receive to do their job, the training and development people receive to deal with current challenges, and having the right tools to do the job. We've invested increasing the number of family support workers at frontline as part of the transformation, and their area of expertise in working directly with families to combat neglect is essential for us. We've also invested in increasing the number of social workers. A key work stream for the transformation is making our complex and bureaucratic systems and processes simpler, so that social workers and family support workers spend more time visiting and working with families than filling in forms and doing bureaucracy. Currently, up until we go live with our new system, most of our social workers and family support workers spend 60% of their time filling forms in rather than doing that direct work with families, and we have to flip that as part of the transformation. We're doing that by simplifying our processes and streamlining the way that families move through our system, but we're also putting in additional dedicated admin support for social workers to support them. 12 months ago, we introduced the restorative practice model, which is a new model of social work that all outstanding local authorities children's services use a form of. It's absolutely focused on direct work with family and on constant connection and maintaining that relationship and spotting the slightest change. We've been one of a handful of successful local authorities to receive funding for social workers in schools pilot, which forms also part of the transformation thinking, which brings educational professionals and social care professionals together to spot issues of neglect as quickly as possible and to work in partnership with the children and families and other professionals to put things right as quickly as possible. Next slide, please. So in terms of progress over the last 2 years and how it's feeding into our transformation around how we deal with neglect. In designing our system, neglect work features in many elements. We are redesigning our front door and our referral process into children's services to be less form-based and more conversational, putting in additional social workers and senior social workers into first response to fully understand the needs of the child, avoid re-referrals and to have conversations with other professionals who know of these children to make sure that the support that we're putting in place absolutely meets the needs. We're building on our successful place-based approach with our earliest help model through services in partnership and services that are commissioned to spot the first signs of neglect, including family support contracts across the county. We're currently training all county council staff and all partners workforce in the use of the highly regarded NSPCC Neglect Graded Care Profile tool. This helps social workers, family support workers, health visitors, GPs and other professionals assess against a number of continuing neglect criteria and suggests how to work collectively together with the family to improve. The new model mainstreams a whole family approach which works so successfully with our Building Resilient Families and Communities cohort, dealing with root cause, not symptoms. We are national leaders with this programme and seen thousands of families prevented from spiralling into crisis through debt, unemployment, poverty, domestic abuse and drugs and alcohol. And these issues, if they aren't addressed, frequently spiral into neglect. So we are mainstreaming that key approach to working in a systems way with families. The new model reduces handoffs between professionals as families move through the system, because we know in that way information and insight can get lost. So we will have a key worker model, wherever possible, one linked worker staying with the family as they are involved in our services and that key contact for the family. Our model at a local district level will incorporate adult specialist workers, which is building on the BRFC model. This will be for those families who are deeper into the system, into children in need and child protection, to prevent escalation of children into care wherever possible by addressing root cause. So we know that neglect and the impact on our children is caused obviously by their home environment. That home environment is created by parents. And if parents are experiencing debt, poverty, drug and alcohol issues, housing problems, domestic violence, that neglect can spiral. So working with the adults in the family as well as the children will help us to slow down and hopefully cease that spiralling of neglect. Family group conferencing will be introduced across the whole of the system and all of our service. National evidence shows that this is one of those things that makes the biggest difference. We've received extra funding from Cabinet to offer family group conferencing at every stage in our system to all families and at every point in the process. Family group conferencing brings in extended family and close friends to work with parents to pull together a plan of support that enables those parents to rely on that extended network to support them to improve and maintain a quality home environment for their children and stop the rise of neglect. The new quality assurance framework is based on the quality of work we do and the impact we make rather than a yes-no tick box approach. So Ofsted was asked, has the visit happened? Was it timely? Of course that's important, but actually what is more important is around understanding the quality of what we do and that we make a difference. Learning from the new quality and assurance framework will feed into and has fed into our new learning and development programme for practitioners across the whole system, not just the County Council, but partners. Part of this identified some time ago the need for a neglect deep dive, and all partners involved in the Staffordshire Safeguarding Board over the last 6 months have all done multi-agency audits and single organisation audits following the serious case review publication to check where we need to still improve on dealing with neglect. Hence the introduction of the NSPCC tool that I referred to a moment ago. And family group conferencing has also arisen from this audit, that family group conferencing across the system. There is a current review of the multi-agency safeguarding hub to ensure that initial strategy discussions when child protection referrals are received are timely and include all necessary information and partners' input. And neglect is an ongoing priority for the Safeguarding Board. It was a priority in our annual plan for 2021 and will be a continuing priority for 21-22. And regular updates from the Assurance and Scrutiny Group, the wider partnership group that sits beneath the board, updates are provided monthly on progress against training and development dealing with neglect and any performance issues that we're spotting that are related to neglect. Next slide. So this will be the new district operational structure. So there will be an integrated team in each district with the key worker model and resources available across that district team, including adult specialist workers, education welfare workers, family support workers, social workers, SEND key workers, having a single conversation around the children and families' needs and ensuring that no information falls through any gaps. Next slide. One of the things that we've really tried hard to put right over the last 2 years is rediscovering becoming a learning organisation. And the serious case review, looking at the events of 2 years ago, did question whether the council had lost that element, and I think that was a correct question. So 18 months ago, we created a new intelligence function as part of the first phase of transformation, giving us much improved performance oversight and direct line of sight for me on critical emerging issues. Brings learning together from performance reports, audits, deep dives, feedback from practitioners, feedback from children, young people and families themselves, and working alongside the principal social worker, agrees the process for communicating with frontline workers and managers and developing a whole system training needs programme. We've talked already about it's important that knowing our work with children and families is high quality and making a difference. Across organisation, all tiers of staff steer this work. So we've introduced a quarterly report from independent reviewing officers, which feeds into this. Independent reviewing officers and independent chairs chair child protection conferences and reviews of children on plans. They spot trends in good practice and where trends of poor performance from practitioners are starting to cause them concern. This feeds into the training and development plan that is rolled out through the principal social worker. The new structure and the new approach is based on 12 to 18 months of talking to and studying those providing outstanding services across the country to children and families, and where we can see the positive impact that they're absolutely making, particularly in terms of that dedicated time for social workers and family support workers to work directly with families. For the first time for some years, we had a practice week this year, which is in a period of 1 week, 50 senior managers keeping their diaries free to observe practice. We saw over 500 observations of practice and audits recorded, and all the good and poor practice captured, and again informing our learning plan. The Children Improvement Board still exists. It was retained, even though theoretically, once you become a good children's services, there is no requirement to have one. I think the Children's Improvement Board was established way back in 2012 after a poor Ofsted. We've retained that for as best practice to hold myself and my officers to account. That's chaired by the Cabinet member, and the chair of this committee attends. It receives in-depth performance reports and deep dives on areas of concern, and makes recommendations to the business which are implemented around how we need to improve. The new model introduces more reflective and learning discussions between managers and the team members at one-to-ones and whole team sessions where particular difficult cases are talked through, which may be causing a practitioner some difficulties or some concerns, or not knowing quite what to do around improving the home situation. And the whole team talks together to share experience and ideas to inform future practice. Next slide, Helen, please. So 2 years on, I think we've made great strides. We start a transformation phase 2 today, as I've said, but there remain some challenges. Recruitment and retention, particularly of social workers, is an issue in every single local authority in the country. There is constant poaching from one another. And with Staffordshire being placed where it is, surrounded easy access to at least 17 other local authorities with children's services, retention of staff is something that we keep our eye on all the time. The 14 West Midlands local authorities are working on a regional recruitment campaign at the moment, and have tried to broker an agreement to stop things like golden hellos and loyalty bonuses. Although I've noted in recent times, they have started to be reintroduced in a local authority not too far away. Staffordshire has always had a high reputation, and we get a lot of social workers that come here for the training and development that we offer, but then move on to other local authorities, either closer to their home or for additional inducements, shall we say. However, we do actively monitor and manage this. We're going to run, as well as the West Midlands regional campaign, we've started, just about to start our own new campaign, and we still have the lowest agency rates in the region. And you may have noticed, to kind of reinforce the difficulties in recruitment, some press coverage of Stoke City Council, who are seeking quite a number of social workers, actually recruiting abroad for social workers due to the difficulties recruiting in this country. The culture is shifting, but we've still further to go, which I'm hoping the second phase of the transformation with the associated development plan over the summer will move us forward. There is still, for my mind, a little bit too much of command and control, a little bit too bureaucratic, still a little hierarchical. And we need to empower our staff to be able to feel that they have more time to work with families and children, and that decisions around families' future are made as close to the children and families as possible. COVID, as you would imagine, has brought numerous challenges. They're ongoing at the moment. How we support schools and our families to close the gap caused by COVID in terms of education, but also around the mental health issues that we will see emerge over the next few months. And there will be the legacy of COVID, which is covered extensively, I guess, in any kind of media narrative that you look at. And for children's services, we may well be the legacy of that. So if there are issues of job opportunities for those who've recently fell into unemployment, If they're not addressed quickly and more families slide into poverty, that will increase the potential for more neglect cases. We know a cause and effect of families who are struggling, who are just coping, who are just getting by with a blow like unemployment. That is the thing which often pushes them over the edge into neglect taking a hold at home. We have, in pulling together the new model, when we've looked at the resource that we need, we have tried to model a 3-year prediction on what we think that demand may well be coming as part of that COVID legacy. But I guess for all of us, there is an element of guesswork in that because we don't know what we don't know. We have based our predictions on what we saw coming out of the first lockdown of COVID, but time will tell whether we have got that right or not. And that concludes the presentation.
Helen, thank you for that. That's really helpful. Sorry, I'll just get a little bit of feedback there. I think it's really encouraging to hear the way that the organisation has learned from this, and I think that that criticism of not being a learning organisation, or could be a better learning organisation, is perhaps a reasonable one, and I don't think we're on our own there. I think all organisations struggle with that. I was particularly impressed, I have to say, with that introduction of the local district model that looks at local intelligence. I do think that that will make a huge difference. And it looks like that we're in a very different place to perhaps where we were a couple of years ago. There does seem to be a lot of new initiatives there. And I know you mentioned a 3-year programme around assessment. It will be, I think it would be useful to have some sort of evidence based around that, because all of these additional initiatives will come with a certain amount of resource, funding and various other needs that they have. I think I'll open it up for questions in just a second. Could I just remind members, though, that this report is different to the reports that we usually have brought here. This does refer, obviously, as we all know, to those dreadful events that happened about 2 years ago in February 2019. There has been a lengthy criminal investigation around about 2 years. That also ran alongside an internal process. And also, please bear in mind that all of that evidence would have been shared with the CPS. And now we have a serious case review. I mention that only because I don't think that this is the place or time, and we shouldn't be going over those events and rehearsing perhaps failures and actions that were taken or weren't taken, and investigations. I do think that we should concentrate our questions around how we move forward, what our new processes will look like. That sort of confidence that we then have in, as an organisation, in the service that we give to young people, obviously in the most stressful and vulnerable times of their lives. Helen, if I could just start with a couple of questions. I noticed that from this serious case review, will we be implementing all of the recommendations that it makes in full? And I know that some of the recommendations, talked about having focus groups. Didn't quite understand where that fits into the process, but is there a plan for such groups, and how will the learning from them inform the processes as we move forward?
There is a plan. The plan is owned by the Safeguarding Board, because, as you know, the report was commissioned by the Safeguarding Board, so the report belongs to all partners. So there is a comprehensive plan pulled together by the Safeguarding Board manager and the different partners on the Safeguarding Board partnership. They are reported monthly to the Safeguarding Board. Focus groups, I think, is a strange term. How we've interpreted that are cross-organisational groups of practitioners brought together, and involving families and children who've experienced our services where that was appropriate. All the learning from that feeds basically into the development work of the partnership and individual organisation. So all the learning is taken through to a partnership development plan, and training and development is delivered either as appropriate for all partners or where it is something that relates to a specific partner's accountability that is taken forward through the particular training and development of that organisation.
That's great, thank you. Just a couple of others, if I could. You were talking, I know that I've heard you quote previously when we've had conversations about the danger of organisations being data rich and intelligence poor. There are several ex-police officers here who I'm sure will tell you the difficulty of trying to learn from intelligence. It's not an easy process, and is one that also is affected by the culture of the organisation, as you've already identified. However, it is of real importance that we spot some of these signs. I know that you referred to them in your opening address about how do we deal with these issues that are of an insidious nature as opposed to a clear threshold event, and that does make life difficult. I suppose the issue, and it's a question as well for Councillor Sutton, is that, you know, we've adopted, as you pointed out, is best practice, the restorative practice model, which I think we all agree is the right way forward. However, given the difficulties that you alluded to right at the beginning about the insidious nature of these things and there not being a threshold event, and you talked about, you know, the staff didn't have the skills to do that, and it's about quality interventions and making a difference. I think you also talked about having a conversational approach rather than a form-based approach. However, there is a place for forms, isn't there, and sort of command and control. I suppose the question is, how confident are we that we're entering into a restorative practice model that does leave individuals in sometimes some vulnerable situations? And again, I emphasise it's probably the right thing for us to be doing, but we have to have some confidence that staff can spot those signs early on and be able to intervene at the right time.
So if I go first, if Councillor Sutton wants to add anything. So I think, you know, being absolutely clear, the restorative practice model is not about keeping children at home when we think they're not safe.
No.
Nor is it about keeping children at home when parents show no inclination to improve home conditions. This is restorative practice model is around working differently with those families who do want to improve but perhaps don't know how to. So what we've seen, I guess, over the last 10 years nationally and locally, is an increase of children coming into care at much earlier times than previously. You will be aware of the massive increase of children that came into care, really probably following the baby P incident. And what we've seen locally and what we've seen nationally is no work done with parents who genuinely care for their children and want to change. We've kind of judged that they can't change, that they don't have the means to change, and therefore brought increasing numbers of children into care on almost a no risk, you know, basis, I guess. What that has meant is the places for children in care to go to in terms of either fostering, adoption, residential is bust. We are delivering very poor outcomes for those children that are brought into care early, because nationally we're not used to handling or providing for those amount of children. And the Children's Act 1989 made it very clear that the primary purpose of children's services was to keep families together wherever it is safe to do so. And Isabel Trowler, who is the Children's Commissioner, who produced a report last year called Clear Blue Water, which was a national report on social worker on social work and other reports by the Roundtree Foundation highlighted that the scales are tipped too far, that too many marginal and very low risk children were ending up in the family justice system, and that we couldn't continue as like this. So the restorative practice approach for those young people and families is all about working with the families who want to improve those home conditions, rather than a social worker, and I'm exaggerating for effect, just instructing a family on a plan around what needs to improve and going back in 6 weeks' time to see if there has been any improvement. The restorative practice model is around those social workers and using family support workers with those particular families, spending more time working alongside the family. And I know of cases elsewhere in the country where actually family support workers are in the home 24 hours a day to support the family to improve. Yeah. So every outstanding local authority across the country uses this approach in one way or another. And in 2019, where we were in Staffordshire, we were bringing more children into care than any other place in the country, including inner city Manchester, Birmingham and London. And something tells me that, knowing Staffordshire as we do, that didn't feel quite right. No. So we had always between 900 or 1,000 children in care for many years. In fact, I think we dropped just below 900 around some years ago. But then since Baby P and, the Sharon Shoe Smith incidents and everything else, we now have, 1,250. And so it felt, when looking at those outstanding authorities, that we weren't doing all that we could to enable families where it's safe to do so to improve and to work with them, and hence the new model. So it is around working with the willing and able, not those who show no inclination to want to make life better for their children. And restorative practice, is always says it's around working with the family, not doing to the family. It's around building a relationship and understanding the family. So you spot that slide and that impact of insidious neglect because you understand the family, but only where it is safe to do so.
No, that's very encouraging. Thank you for that. I take the points you make, but I'm pretty sure that when it comes to how we make these decisions, it will be about those young people that are probably subject to neglect being, the driving factor. Mark, did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And if I talk a little bit more specifically about that data and intelligence point that you raised, I'm very much more now reassured that since the intelligence information that we have around children's services has been working directly to Helen, and so there's that little bit more control about what they do. Actually, what we're getting back now is much more better. It's much better and is useful in doing something about it. Previously the information that used to be received was based around the data that we sent to the DFE on a regular basis, and it was collected really just for that purpose. But now it really does ask that so what type question. And Helen alluded to the Children Improvement Board, which I share. Now the reports we get now are far more specific, and they are developed by that unit, and they are detailing areas of concern that have come up, good practice, not so good practice. So those things can be identified easier to see if there are themes that need addressing, whether that's a particular one-off, whether there's a theme over a few months, a few years. So that information is being used far more now to direct where we go, and also to be able to feed back to staff to learn from it. So I'm very much reassured from that data, information, intelligence angle.
No, thank you very much.
If I could just add to that, Chair, all that information and the qualitative information from children and families themselves is used by the principal social worker to now run monthly sessions with team managers, which we didn't have for some while. And whilst there is a training and development plan for the whole service, what we are now doing, particularly as we move into implementation of phase 2, is targeting support to individual managers where we are seeing trends in a locality, as well as trends across the whole service. The real challenge with a county, a Shire county kind of services, is how its consistency. So, do you see the same consistency and quality in Leek as you would see in Cotsall? And that's what we've really had to focus on. I do think it is more challenging for counties to ensure that consistency of good practice, because I know colleagues, that work in smaller unitaries, that when they walk out there, well, in the oldie world before COVID, when they walked out their office, actually their 10 team managers would be sat in front of them. I've got 69 team managers across the county, and so ensuring that consistency is absolutely key. Whilst we're so geographically spread, and the principal social worker role has made a huge difference to that.
No, that's really helpful. Thank you. I've got 4 hands by the look of it. I think Councillor Ron Clark, you have a question.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. One or two issues, Helen. First and foremost, touching on the last part, on the families. You said that when you engage with families, that there'll be 6 weeks then to sort of go back to see if there's any improvements. Are the families informed, first and foremost, as to the criteria now you're using? But basically, if there's no improvement, then what the consequences could be? That's the first question. The second question, in respect of your presentation, which is very, very encouraging, moving forward on the plan which you've sort of described. I think you raised 1 or 2 concerns yourself insofar as the current situation, whereby that the current situation where so many people then have lost their jobs, and therefore that could create a family sort of issue, and therefore that could then sort of increase the numbers as opposed to where we are currently. That being the case, you also then sort of went on to say about the difficulties in respect of recruitment, good quality sort of support workers. Now, again, I think we've all seen, well, I have in recent years in the industries about sort of supply and demand. You'll always get then the people then who are offering the carrot then to sort of attract people. The question I'm posing on that, of your concerns, with the potential increase of more sort of children in need, let's put it that way, in respect of then staff shortages, what provisions have you got then in the event then that we start then to sort of see a shortage in staff? How do we cope with that workload? Now, I know you've got the framework, but again, the real sort of base of the framework is the contact with the families who have difficulties, and that then, once that's in the system, I understand the system you sort of described, and fair enough, let's hope that system works. But then, if then we're short staff shortages, how do we then sort of make sure that people do not fall through the net? Sorry, there's a number of questions there, but I felt it was important. Might as well do it all in one go. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Okay. So in terms of children on a child protection plan, the families are obviously taught through the plan. Okay. They are aware of what is required, and they are also fully informed of consequences. Is a horrible word, isn't it? Of what might happen should there not be the necessary improvement. So they are party to that. what I'm hoping is we will always have to have, you're right around forming, we always have to have a child protection plan that is captured. But what the child protection plan will increasingly include is how our social workers and family support workers will work with the family to support them. So a very straightforward example is where people feel that a social worker may feel that a family are not providing adequate nutritional food for their children. Exaggerating for effect, traditionally in social work, what would have happened on reviewing the plan would be the social worker would ask to see the fridge in the cupboards so they could have a look at what food was available. What would happen with the new approach with the plan is that the family support worker probably for that family would say to mum or dad, come on, get your coat on, let's go down the shop, I will show you the kind of foods that you can afford on your budget to cook nutritional meals for your family during the week. We'll come back and I'll show you how to knock up scrambled egg or something like that. So instead of just telling how to improve on the child protection plan, it will be how we will work with the family then to improve. We have had £8 million worth of investment into the service over 4 years, and we have increased the number of social workers, and we have substantially increased the number of family support workers in recognition of the value of that direct work. We have tried to forecast in the Cabinet report that went in November what we think, to our best knowledge, demand will be coming out of COVID over the next 3 years. And if we've got that right, at the moment we have, everything is exactly where it should be, then our resourcing, we've been resourced for those numbers. Obviously, if that situation changes dramatically, there will need to be, with the administration at the time, potentially further discussions. But I'm hopeful, whilst I say we don't know what we don't know, but I'm hopeful that by using intelligence around the trends that we've seen over the last 12 months, that we're there or thereabouts on that. In terms of staff retention, there isn't a Staffordshire answer to this really. It is a national problem in terms of not enough people wanting to enter the profession. What we always get at Staffordshire are social workers wanting to work for us because our training and development offer is seen as pretty good. We are now looking at what we can do in terms of enhancing a move from a social worker to a senior practitioner as a career opportunity within the resourcing we've got, so that people don't feel the need to move to progress their career. And what we're trying to negotiate regionally is that all local authorities pay the same rate for the different types of social workers, and that anything like golden hellos and loyalty bonuses and introduce a friend and all the rest of it ceases. However, there are authorities regionally and nationally that are in recruitment and retention crisis at the moment, and I think that last point is really, really difficult. What I do know through speaking to a colleague at DCS at another authority who introduced such inducements, shall we say, a few years ago, actually the staff didn't stay very long. And what I would say over the last 2 years is we've seen a significant number of staff come back to Staffordshire. So it is a national issue, but I think, and I haven't got a magic wand to kind of make it, to sort it out. But I think Staffordshire is as well placed as anybody in terms of our teaching partnerships with the universities, our learning and development officer, our satisfaction of our social workers. As I say, on the first national survey, we outperform we're above the national and regional average for people feeling satisfied with their job and well supported. So building on that reputation, I think we are still a good children's services and have been for a long time. And people always want to work in a good children's services. So I'm not saying there'll never be an issue. It is a national problem, but I think we're doing all we can to try and address it.
Thank you, sir. Mark, did you want to add something to that?
Yes, if I could, Mr. Chairman, just very, very briefly, just to pick up on Helen's point regarding staff. through my work regionally with the lead members in the West Midlands, and also with the National LGA Children's Board, I mean, this is a problem across the whole of the country in recruitment and retention of staff. But personally, I'm very determined to try and push forward the view that Helen just shared with you about making sure that local authorities are paying the same rate, so that we don't get this. We'll go next door, we'll spend a year there, then we'll come back again, then we'll go somewhere else, because it's not just no good for us. It's not very good for children. It's not good for families, and it's not good nationally as well. You know, yeah, determined to try and make sure that that's the case.
No, thank you for that. Ron, did you have any follow-up questions?
No, Chairman, no. I was quite pleased actually and encouraged with the reply Helen gave. So,
right, thank you.
And I do accept wholeheartedly. That's why I posed the question. The difficulties, but again, those difficulties we have to try to overcome. And the question really is, are we putting things in place in the event of? So, yeah. Thanks for the reply. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for that. I wonder if you could take your hand down then, Ron.
Right, yes.
Councillor Charlotte Atkins, I think you were next.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just a couple of questions. One of the points in the report says that the focus was on the mother, or parents, particularly the mother, rather than the rights, wishes and feelings of the children. And I wondered if that has been identified as an issue among social workers and other professionals, because obviously what we hear from the report is the mother was very feisty, very domineering in terms of the parents. So that's the first question, and have we addressed that issue? Because if we're not focusing on the rights and feelings of the children, then we're missing a big element of child safeguarding. And the second question is, the report identified the importance of combined chronologies, saying that would be very helpful across professionals. But somewhere within the report, it also talks about, I think, social workers asking for changes in IT systems. And I wondered, given our experience of nearly a year of the pandemic and our increasing reliance on IT like we're using today, whether there have been any changes in IT requirements and whether those issues have been addressed. Because we've got the health white paper having now come out, talk about integrated care systems, and will that be part of the process of children transformation? Because after all, one of the problems here was the lack of coordination between the health professionals, and the report particularly highlighted the Midlands Partnership NHS Trust, and the fact that there was difficulties of those organisations and other professionals being in touch with the lead social worker, and hopefully the combined chronologies would help. But obviously an IT system that joined up would be very helpful. Now I appreciate that it's taken well over 20 years for the NHS to have an integrated IT system whereby GPs and other professionals can work. In fact, well over 20 years. I remember raising it in 1997. So what progress are we making towards making changes in IT to help social workers, but also to help better coordination across other professionals? Thank you.
Thank you for that. Helen?
Okay, I think I got all that, Councillor Atkins. If I miss anything, come back to me. Around the focus on the mother, yes, part of the training and development plan is just, and I suppose one of the things that I would say is that I do think we need to recognise this was a horrible, tragic incident for the family. But at any one time, we are working with nearly 9,000 families across our system, and actually our number of serious case reviews is a small, I guess. One is one too many, but I do think we need to recognise that at any one time we are working with thousands of families, and our practitioners work really well with them. And I think I'd be doing my service a disservice if I kind of didn't make that point. There is, though, in social work, frequently a focus on the mother. That has been a criticism of many serious case reviews, from many areas across the years, and many mothers are very engaging and seen as, the pivotal point for the family. So we have done, as part of our training and development, around that focus on the children within the family and the impact. But the other focus, I think, that came out the serious case review, which we're also just done a deep dive on internally, and we're just taking the recommendations from that through. It will go through the Children's Improvement Board, is around the way that we work with men in families. I think it talks about significant men. And obviously, if you've read the report, you'll know the comments that were made within this report. But quite frequently, in many serious case reviews across the country, we do see comments around the way that social workers engage or not with significant men in the family. And so we've recently done a deep dive audit across the service as part of the learning coming out of the serious case review to spot the issues that we need to address in terms of significant men. Chronologies, I think, are absolutely vital, and multi-agency chronologies. There should be chronologies on file from child protection onwards. We are, as part of our development plan, trying to roll out chronologies really from children in need, where there's no requirement to do so, but often children, as you know, escalate up our system. And actually, if we've got a chronology from the first referral that we've had, then that will help professionals understand the family and how to work with them. In terms of our IT systems, we are upgrading Care Director at the moment, which is version 6, and then we are reconfiguring Care Director to reflect the new pathways and processes that I talked about. But we have rolled out, we'd started to do it anyway, but COVID this time last year did accelerate it, very up-to-date IT equipment for all our social workers and family support workers, so they have the tools to do the job. And as part of the transformation, we are also identifying the 8 bases for our teams, and looking at our children's centres to make sure they're as smart as they can be in terms of the ICT that's available to people who are based in those area offices. We are part of the integrated care record. Children's went after adults, but it's just about there. So we are looking at, how we join up across health particularly. So that integrated care record went first with adults. Children's is phase 2, which is just about to go live as part of that thinking around an integrated care system. But the review of the MASH will be crucial to this as well, in terms of how the multi-agency safeguarding hub, when considering, referrals into first response and elsewhere, join up. The review of the MASH is ongoing at the moment, but again, as highlighted, an issue that we absolutely need to bottom for both ourselves and Stoke, which is our initial strategy discussions, which at the moment, the way the MASH is modelled, due to recent limits on partners' resources, means that we often have to do it twice and have 2 conversations because the partner organisations don't have the resource to put in right at the beginning. That has absolutely got to be sorted out as part of the review of the multi-agency safeguarding hub. And part of that review is also looking at the ICT system that's used in there. And whilst that might be a couple of years away, a recognition that we need a much better system to share information across all partners that makes the MASH work as seamlessly as possible. So I think I've answered everything, unless there's anything I've missed.
I think you did, but I mean, from my recent experience of a case that you're aware of, there does seem to be a reluctance by social workers, possibly because of time constraints, I don't know, to share information with the NHS, like the GP is not being shared information and so on. And I do think that there is a sort of a holding back by some social workers. I said I don't know if it's time constraint, I don't know whether it's culture, but certainly by having that combined chronology, which is accurate as opposed to inaccurate, would be a great help, I think. It would also be a great help to families, recognising that their input is included in that chronology. is very often parents feel that having done to them rather than done with them, and I'm afraid that culture still exists. But thank you for your response. And I'm saying it is reassuring that we have recruited social workers so that the caseload has gone down from 30 to 18. But I think, following on from what Councillor Clark said, we're going to find huge increase in demand, and I suspect that those workloads will go up again unless we can be assured that we can recruit more to meet that demand. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Anne Edgeller, I think you were next.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you for your report, Helen. I've got two questions, then just a comment, really. My questions actually are based on a bit of life experiences, and I'd like to ask the question, how can a child, when it's been neglected and it's put into care, how can we be sure that that family is capable of taking that child back and looking after it as it should do? You know, it really is a concern, and I speak because the child that I adopted, when you sit there and see him, and you've talked about mums and mothers, rip a photograph up of the only photograph that he'd got of his mother, and he ripped it up in front of my eyes, and you think to yourself, what experience had it gone to? So my question is, how can we be sure that these families are capable of taking these children back once they've been in care? And the other thing is, do we help parents if they've got any sort of mental health problems or anything, that we can put these children back with them, knowing that they're going to be safe? That's my first question. My second question is, do you ever get complaints from families about social workers and about the way they've conducted themselves in the family home? And then the other comment I've got is there any way that you talk about retaining staff, is there any way that you can put sort of in their contract they have to stay for 5 years or something like that once they're trained? Or can't we do that? That's just a comment, actually. I can see Helen smiling, so yeah, if you'd like to answer those two questions for me, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne.
Okay, so I'll take the complaints from families first, because that's more simpler. So I do occasionally get complaints from families around social workers, but very few. Very few. I also get compliments about social workers. Again, very few, although more over the last 12 months than I've had in previous years since we introduced the new practice model. What I don't think that says is that all families are, they're not our customers. Most of our families don't want somebody with a badge walking down the path, do they, knocking on the front door. So if you compare the number of complaints, I guess, from families that we work with through children's social care, the number of complaints that we receive from families with SEND, there is a marked difference, and I think that is frequently because those families who have, not always, but those families who are really fighting for the children's rights with SEND are well informed, understand the legislation, belong to pressure groups, have contacts, have a network. The families that we work with in social care often don't have that same experience because of their individual circumstances. So I think it's quite a tricky one to kind of weigh up. What we do have now, though, over the last 2 years, is far more contact with families who want to work with us, who have experience of us, as part of informing how we improve. Not every family wants, even if they're still working with us or not working with us, if their child's gone through the system, want to engage with us, but some do, about how things can improve, and where those families do, we engage those. Often families where children have actually gone into care and are still in care, but who want to talk to us about how it felt, what their experiences have been. So we try and capture it through other routes, I suppose, as that. In terms of children going back to families, in Staffordshire there are very few at the moment that do that. What I would say is that no child who was not safe should not be going back home. Now that decision is not made by the local authority, that decision is made through the courts. So the family courts place the child in care. The social worker recommends to the courts that a child, is subject to a care order. It's a judge that approves that or not. And it's the same if you want to rescind a care order. So you may have worked with that family, but you have to go back to the family court to get that judgment rescinded. So there is a legal process of protection there for the family. And that's important in both directions as a way, because it takes out any, it ensures that standards are met through the courts in terms of decisions, that really important decisions that are made about children's futures. But it also takes away any unconscious bias, unconscious prejudice that there may be, I guess, in our own workforce, when working with a particular family. It's there to equalise, I suppose. What we do know, though, is that those outstanding authorities that I talked about, who have fully embedded the restorative practice model, they have a view around children returning back to the family. And where they've seen it work really successfully is where they've worked with a family for a number of years and they've kept the children safely at home. I'm talking really around neglect now, not more serious child protection, threats, but around neglect. There is often in a family's life, I'm sure we'll all recognise, it's going back to that event, an event that happens that actually pushes them into crisis. It might be bereavement, it might be job loss, it might be debt. And the children, we recognise that there is, for a time, it's no longer safe for the children to be there, so they're taken into care. What other local authorities have done, and in particular North Yorkshire, is they kind of stand back and look at the family and say, well, we've worked with this family for 2, 3, 4 years, and we've kept this family together and the children were safe. But something has gone wrong for them in their lives. And instead of just walking away from that family, who we've invested all this time in, let's continue to work with that family, with the child in care, to see if we can restore that equilibrium. And if we can get them through that crisis, and once we're assured they're through that crisis and we've put support in to make things return to what was normal, they will then consider returning the child home, but only where it is they are convinced that it is safe to do so. And no court should be returning a child home, approving a rescinding of a care order, unless they are convinced of that stability. So it would be years rather than months.
Yeah, thank you. And can I just come back, Chairman? Do we help these parents if they have got problems themselves? Do we help them so we can put the child back?
Yeah, so the whole, as part of the transformation, one of the things we've tried to do is mainstream the building resilient families and communities approach, which was recognising, as said earlier, I think that a child's issues are caused by their environment. Yeah. And if where the environment is for children who are subject to neglect is home. Yeah. So if we're working with the child, which we need to do, you're still not addressing root cause, you're addressing the symptoms. So the root cause may well be mental health issues, it might be debt, it might be drugs and alcohol, it might be domestic violence, it might be a combination. So what we're putting into our new model are what we're calling a collective term of adult specialist workers. So they will have specialisms in all those things that I've just talked about, or they will be commissioned through the commission contracts we've got, and they will work directly with the parents around their root cause, what is causing the crisis in the home. Because we can work with children, trauma informed and work constantly with children, which we will do. But if we don't sort out the root cause of the problem, then they will just ping pong in and out of our systems forever. And we won't resolve the root. Now that is only, Anne, with families who want to. Yeah. So there are some families, as I said at the beginning, really, I think, see families who don't want to sort things out, who don't want to, make life a little bit better at home or less chaotic. Then those children aren't safe and ultimately need a different answer. But it's for these families who who are in crisis or who really do care for the children but just don't know how to, that we want to work with.
Yeah, thank you for all the good work you do. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Anne. Councillor Brian Jones, thank you. Next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everybody. I think it's just worth saying, Helen, on that point about complaints about social workers, I'm sure they will get complaints because they're doing a good job as well, and some of the families might not be happy about interventions that are going in. Anyway, as requested, I put 6 questions into John Francis. I'm pleased to say that you've covered 3 of those in your report, Helen, which was very enlightening. So thank you for that. I just want to pick up on one of the points of Councillor Charlotte Atkins, because myself, my number one concern was the IT systems, because the sharing of information is always the biggest problem. So I want to echo that point, that we really need to move forward on that. And I note early in your report, Helen, you mentioned the admin support. I've no doubt what Councillor Atkins said about time will always be a factor. You have to prioritise, and invariably that will be dealing with the family. The paperwork comes later, inevitably there's some slippage, so I'm pleased to hear that. Just a couple of things then, please, from the questions I was going to ask. One is a straightforward one, and one perhaps a little bit more detail. In terms of the multi-agency chronologies, one of the recommendations was that as a bare minimum, that should commence when a child is subject to the care protection plan. Now, I think it's a good idea that we have a benchmark where that comes in so everyone knows. Are we satisfied that that is the right point where that should come in, or will there be occasions where we think we need to kick that off before we've fully gone to that? So that's perhaps the more in-depth question. And the second one, recommendation 4, was about core group invitations. And it mentioned that people would often go to a meeting and then they'd go after 10 minutes or 20 minutes because they weren't sure how long it would take. So I applaud that when that invitation goes out, there will be a time scale of how long that's going to last. But that actually is meaningless on its own, because that doesn't preclude somebody going. And as the chairman mentioned, a number of us have police backgrounds, and having worked with outside agencies, my biggest frustration was people turning up, A, not having done the actions from the previous meeting, and B, saying, sorry, I've got to go. Now, we have to accept that people will always have an emergency to move on, but is there going to be something put in place, not just to say there is an expectation that you will stay to the end of the meeting, but some form of audit, if you like, or some method that we can introduce to make sure that's not just a wish list of a question, rather than it actually does deliver on the ground. Thank you, Ellen.
Thanks. So in terms of the core group, you're absolutely right. What I will do is take back the recommendation to the Safeguarding Partnership around the audit on the expectation. We do make it clear that people are expected to be there for the duration. However, we all know, don't we, that there are times when that doesn't happen. But I will take that back as a suggestion for audit, that we look at that as a Safeguarding Partnership. And in terms of the chronologies, yeah, I mean, child protection, there is obviously that's at the pointy end, as you know, of children's services, and there are kind of requirements around that. I would like to see chronologies, well, from children in need stage, really. I guess the caveat with that is that we have thousands and thousands of children that are kind of captured as children in need, and we might need to be a little bit more specific, I guess, around some of the criteria on that. But certainly, I would like to see multi-agency chronologies as best practice across the whole system. What I'm hoping through the transformation in those integrated district teams, as part of trying to have a more integrated approach, and for almost an iterative process. Where we are at the moment, I think if you're a children and family coming into any of my services at the moment, I think there's something like 40 plus different assessments you can go through, captured on 40 plus different forms, and families having to tell the stories multiple times. I think if we move from what we're trying to get to in terms of Staffordshire and then roll that out multi-agency, is that, you know, if you're referred into our services, whatever they are, SEND, children in need, you know, or a combination of any of those, that we have one assessment, which is iterative, with the key worker, that every professional inputs into, and it's, instead of having 10 different assessments on somebody's file, you've got one which is integrated and kind of captures the needs in one time and flows through the system with the key worker and with the family, and the chronology is part of that. Because I think what we have at the moment is we just make it really complicated for people. And we absolutely have to have a chronology, because we've got all these different bits of paper sitting on different systems. That is a massive ask for social workers and others to pull together. So if we have one integrated assessment from day one of coming into our services, the chronology starts there. The assessment and the chronology should flow then with the family through all the services.
I think, if I just come back in, Mr. Chairman, I think that's exactly what we need, Helen. That sounds great. If you've got 40 different forms and you have to go about sharing those, what a nightmare. It won't happen. So, yeah, great idea, Helen. Very positive. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that, Helen. Thank you, Brian. Councillor Ann Beach, I think you indicated. Do you still have a question?
Yes, please, Chair. Part of it's being covered by Councillor Edgeler, but it appears to me, you know, that we want to get onto the same salary scales as other councils to stop them headhunting and dangling these carrots, you know, but that could take years. That is not going to happen overnight. And I believe Alan said that, you know, we give really good training and development for our social workers, and then, you know, they probably move on, probably somewhere nearer home, or, as I say, they take up this opportunity from other councils of extra salary. Now, a lot of employees, once they've invested a lot of time and resource in training, they do have something in place in their contracts that they must give back, go back a few years, as Councillor Edgeler indicated. So that was my question, what she said. But so why can't we implement those social workers to be a bit more loyal once they've had their development and training as they do? And also, do they have like a map of career progression so that they can see that they can move up the ladder and then don't wish to move to other councils where they may think that the grass is greener there? So I don't know what your comments on
Thank you.
So in terms of social work salaries, we pay the same as everyone around us. It is those golden hellos that started to be introduced that were the difference. The salary level that we have increased over recent times, because we were behind the market and we were losing people, were team manager roles, but we now pay at or above the average on that. And actually we've had no team manager vacancies for ages, because we do manage to keep those. Years and years ago, there did used to be, before I worked here, the organisation that I worked in did have a policy. If you got training and development and you left within X amount of time, you paid so much back. The council doesn't have that policy, and hardly anywhere does anymore. I mean, I have had that conversation corporately over the last few years, and it was not seen as well as corporate policy is all I can say, because we'd have to apply. Obviously, there's lots of professions across the council that people get training for, not just social workers. Obviously, engineers, all kinds of things, and it was deemed a bit unworkable really in trying to calculate that through. There is clear career progression. So if you join as a newly qualified social worker, you move through to, you know, kind of a standard social worker post. You then can move through to a senior practitioner post. I am looking to see if we can increase the opportunities for for the number of senior practitioners that we've got. There then are opportunities for team manager posts. Having said that, we now have very few team manager posts because people don't leave. What I'm never going to get irritated about is around people moving for promotion and career development, because that's what keeps the world moving really, and that happens in every profession that we've got across the council, and we're never ever going to be able to meet everybody's career ambitions really. Our real problem was retaining social workers as social workers. What I do think we've seen over the last 2 years, as I say, it's a constant struggle, but we are back to where we always were, which was with one of the highest levels of our own social workers in the region, and below national, you know, agency rates. What we do when we have agency workers that come and work for us, where we spot a really good one, we have the conversation around, wouldn't you prefer to work directly for us? Right, and we have actually converted a number of agency social workers into permanent employees. People become agency social workers because the pay is much better. It's day rate, as you can imagine. You don't have to serve anything more than a week's notice. So if you've got children, you know, at home, or your family circumstances change, you can be more flexible. And you can work to suit your lifestyle really, rather than the other way around. I think COVID in some ways has changed that for people, so that more people working from home can flex their working life, you know, around that. And as I say, over the last few months, we have converted a number of agency workers into permanent employees, which is good. We just need to keep having conversations nationally and regionally, to ensure that we're not directly poaching off each other. I mean, the classic for me some years ago, in a city or in a urban unitary in the West Midlands, outside their council offices there was a bus stop, and on the bus stop was a massive advert for a rural Shire county advertising for social workers, saying, why work in a polluted, busy town centre when you could work in a beautiful rural shire? And that caused a bit of uproar, as you can imagine, between the two councils concerned, neither of which were us, obviously. But it was, you know, a few years ago it had kind of got to that. But the 14 DCSs are trying to work much more collaboratively together, because as a region, we want all children's services in the region, you know, to be of a high quality, and we want a stable workforce for everybody. We don't want to be pinching off each other, because it just causes problems down the road, which ultimately what goes around comes around, doesn't it?
Thank you for that. Anne, was there anything else?
Yeah, just another little thing. Thank you for that, Helen. That's really good. I had a chance to visit Nutton Children's Care Centre probably about 18 months ago. And what you've said this morning about going out with the families and taking them to supermarkets and then coming back. And it was a lovely kitchen in Nutton Centre. And there was no one in it. And I said, where is anyone? And they said they'd taken them to the supermarket, which you've said this morning, to go, and now they can buy food for under £10 to feed the family for a certain amount of days. And then they were going to show them how to cook it in the kitchen. And I think that's fantastic, because what we could probably take for granted, and that we've learned after a few burnt offerings over the years, some families can't do that. And it isn't that they don't want to be a good family, just don't know how to do it. So I think that's lovely that people go in now and deal more with the parents to make them better parents, because it isn't everyone that it comes naturally to, is it? So no. Thank you for that one as well.
No, that's really good. Thank you for that. If I just give the last question then to Councillor Paul Snow.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Helen. Excellent report. All the questions I was going to ask have already been asked, and I already spoke to Councillor Sutton when the report initially came out, and I got some answers off Mark. It just really in relation to the last question from Anne, where it talks about putting things in people's contracts. I really feel that the people we have in Staffordshire have got to want to stay in Staffordshire, and putting things in contracts. We could have people here who are just going through motions to become time suits. If we say 5 years, after 2 years they want to go, we can have people 3 years who go through motions. I hate to see that. So really, I think we've just got to continue what we're doing, make it Staffordshire a place where people want to be, and that's the only way we're going to keep them here. Have the right IT setups, the right salary bands, the right people to work with, the right inclusivity with everybody, and just go along that line. I really would hate to see it where it's time limiting contracts, because I think then we'll hold on to wrong people.
I think you're absolutely right from my experience as well. It never really works, does it? These things are good in theory, but in practice, they tend to create perverse incentives, as I recall. Sorry, Helen, did you want to come back on that?
We had this in the police force, didn't we, Bob, where if you say took an advanced driving course, you couldn't leave a shift or whatever it was, and you kept the wrong people in the wrong places for far too long.
No. Mark, I wonder if I could ask you then just to close up with this particular issue.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And before I do, I just wanted to just dwell on one thing that Helen's mentioned on a couple of occasions, but we haven't gone into much detail about, and that's the requirement and the wish to have the voice of the child integrated in everything we do, and I think we've started to do that in much more detail. And members on this committee are also members on the corporate parenting panel will have seen firsthand the experience of that, how now the voice of the child has moved to a completely different level, and we will be having the voice of the child more so certainly in corporate parenting panels going forward, and what the children tell us being incorporated in what we are going to do going forward, which is I think really good news, and it is absolutely essential in my mind, because it's the children that matter in this. So generally, in sort of summing up, I hope that we've been able to explain, and in particular Helen's been able to explain how we've trying to embed that learning from not just from the serious case review, but from other things that we have talked about at this committee and other committees over the last period of time, those important issues, and incorporated that in how we are moving forward. That restorative practice model where we are working with and not working at parents. We're not doing to parents. We are working with families, and I think that's fundamentally one of those really important things, and how we use that data and information intelligently to influence how we move forward and become more of a learning organisation. So not just us in Staffordshire have a good children's services, but also, as Helen alluded to, across the whole region, because if the whole region services are good, it stops those issues where we might lose staff to elsewhere. And of course, we then don't get the situation where a authority goes into requires improvements and they get a whole bunch of cash because of that, and then they can afford the golden handshakes, etc. So if we're all good or outstanding, that will benefit Staffordshire as much as it benefits any other authority in the region. And that's about all I've got to say, Mr. Chairman. So thank you for giving us the time this morning to explain how things are moving forward.
No, thank you for that, Mark. I think that's a really good thing to finish on. I suppose one of the things that I picked up from this as well was just how sad, when I know Helen mentioned several times that, you work with people, but they have to want you to work with them. They have to want to take part. And it is a sad reflection, isn't it, that there are people, unfortunately, who might not want to do that, as difficult as that is to accept here. But I thank you, Helen, for making the time. I know it's been a really busy day with the transformation programme. Thank you for presenting the report and answering the questions. I'm sure I speak for all of us when I say that we're greatly reassured by the answers that you've given us. And actually, I think that that's sort of moving forward more positively as we go, forward to the recommendation. So thank you again for that, and thanks also to Mark.
Well, I just mentioned, Chair, that I will be meeting with the children at 5 o'clock today, so I'm really looking forward to that. The children.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Anne. Right, we'll move on to item 5 and the work programme. Helen, do we have, I suppose everyone's got the work programme in front of them?
Yes, Mr. Spencer. So you've got one calendared meeting remaining in this municipal year, and that's on the 22nd of April, which will be during PERDA. And currently you have 3 items scheduled for that meeting, some of which were moved because initially they were going to be on today, but for various reasons they were moved, and we sort of considered the one item agenda today. So you've got an update on domestic abuse, which members have asked for, a contextual safeguarding review. Again, you've had something on contextual safeguarding on 2 or 3 occasions so far, but this is looking at how it's moving forward, and Catch 22. And again, that's something that you've had before that you wanted to look at after a year, really, to see how things had moved forward.
No, thank you for that. I think it was right that we just made the serious case review the single issue for today. I think we needed to put as much effort as we could just singly into that. I think that's a pretty full agenda for the next meeting, so I don't propose that we're going to alter that in any particular way. Is there any views from members about other things that need to be included as a matter of some urgency or not?
No, Chair.
No? Okay. Right, thank you for that. Helen, is there any other business in part 2? Do I need to go through the moving the public?
No, Chair, nothing on part 2 for this meeting.
Lovely. In that case, then I'll bring the meeting to a close. Thank you all for your contributions. I think that it was a really useful exercise in going through the meeting, and hopefully we go away reassured as we move forward around how we protect the most vulnerable in our communities. So thank you all again, and have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
Bob. Very well,
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye. Bye.
Bye. Bye.